Hi there, welcome to my channel. I am Adam W. Rodriguez, and I am your host here at the Art of AWR. For this particular episode, we are going to be talking about The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Seeing it coming into focus, hopefully? Yeah, awesome. I just finished reading this book and I'm super excited to talk about it. But before we begin, I would like to invite you to subscribe to my channel. I am a visual artist, a performer, a playwright, and a producer of several years. And if you like the idea of a guy who has been in arts and entertainment for 30 some odd years, doing reviews, making observations and giving recommendations about literature and other arts, please consider subscribing to the channel and then hitting that bell so that you get notifications every time a new episode drops. Cool, moving on. The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I did a little bit of history scratching around on Google, and I read a little bit about Gaston Leroux. He was a wealthy fellow who burned through his inheritance and found that he needed to earn a living. So what he ended up doing was becoming a journalist, and he ended up doing critiques of opera from the Paris Opera House. That's where he developed the intimate knowledge of the opera house itself and the culture therein. And it sounds like an amazing place. It even becomes kind of a character in itself in the book. And it's quite fascinating. It would be a wonderful place to visit if I ever went to Paris. Leroux mostly wrote detective stories, kind of following in the footsteps of your Arthur Conan Doyle's, and even before that, Edgar Allan Poe, who is kind of credited for creating the armchair detective. He even does a little nod to Poe in the story itself with the Phantom of the Opera dressing up as the Red Death at this big masquerade ball. It's super cool and very cool imagery. It's inspired artists many times over, and it's wonderful to look at. All that crimson, all that scarlet. It's super great. Going into the history of the Paris Opera as well, there was an incident that is recorded in the annals of the Paris Opera House's history about a chandelier incident where some faulty wiring had damaged a counterweight system for the big chandelier, and the chandelier fell and actually killed somebody. This was during his stint, Leroux's stint as a journalist when he was critiquing over there at the Paris Opera House. So there's these little monograms of truth in the book itself. One of the things that I really like about this book is how he creates a journalist's, historic journalist's tale. Like, he writes it as a historic journalist that is presenting these events as true and factual. I remember when this book was kind of circulating around my group of friends back in the day. It was right when Weber did his musical, and everybody was suddenly interested in the Phantom of the Opera. And a lot of my friends read this book, and they were positive that everything was true and accurate. You know, this is the times before Google and all that stuff, so you weren't just like a type search away from learning whether or not it was true. In fact, it's not true. But what he did was create this wonderful narrative that is built on this fake truth in a style that makes it feel like it could be true, right? He kind of takes a couple of chapters from the book of like Bram Stoker with that kind of epistolary style storytelling. Stoker does it way more so than Leroux. In fact, I think Leroux executes it a little bit better because he mixes epistolary storytelling with more third-person storytelling. When I say epistolary, what I mean is telling a story by using journal entries and diary entries and police reports. And he does that in this, but he does it very sparsely, and it doesn't affect the flow and pace like I kind of felt like it did sometimes in Bram Stoker's novel. So, you know, kudos to Gaston Leroux. I think he was a big fan of Poe, a big fan of Bram Stoker, and he used some of the tools from their toolboxes to create this book, and I think he used them very well. So, hats off. It's an amazing story. Let's go into the kind of story and the pros and cons, right? One of the biggest cons or negatives about this book for myself is that I'm not terribly nuts about the two main characters, which are Christine and Raoul. I don't read a lot of like romantic style novels, but I do know folks who have read this, and they sort of found it kind of lacking as far as the romance elements of this book are concerned. And honestly, it felt kind of gross. It was like this kind of hostage situation where Christine is having to deal with like the psychopathic ghost on this side over here, and then on the other side you have Raoul, who's just kind of entitled to her attentions, and on top of that, she's sort of a hostage of her own morals, right? She wants to be kind, she wants to be pure, she wants to be honorable, and all that kind of feeds into some of her tragicness as well. She's also a hostage of the memory of her father, who she loves and has recently passed. So she just kind of becomes this damsel that's very manic, and it's just frustrating through most of the book. And like I said, it's a big chunk of the book, but I caught myself just kind of reading through it, going, get to the good parts. I want more of your orbital characters, and that's into the pros. The orbital characters, there's a lot of them that are a lot of fun. Two of my favorites are the opera managers who take over the Paris Opera House at the beginning of the book, and they're having to deal with the opera ghost, and they think it's just this practical joke that's just gone way too far, and it's really fun kind of watching them interact with each other and trying to deal with this problem with this ghost, and not believing that it's real, and by the end of it just like being so frustrated, and it's really great. It's kind of fun to watch that whole subplot unfold. Another really cool character is the Persian, who shows up in the last act of the book, and he kind of acts as this device to do a bit of a history dump about who the opera ghost really is, because the Persian has this relationship with the opera ghost, and it's really, really awesome stuff. I'm going to try not to do any spoilers. In fact, I don't think any of this is spoiler stuff. I'm talking mostly about kind of structure here. I'm not going to try to drop any actual plot points or anything, but he does come in and explain how the opera ghost is very dangerous, and how he came to be such a genius at things like prestidigitation and magic and illusion and engineering in general. It's a little problematic in a way, because he talks about how he became this sadistic monster by training in foreign lands under foreign rulers who are also sadistic monsters. It made me raise my eyebrow a little bit. Today it probably might have been done differently. I mean, who knows? But it's still a fun read, and all that information is super fascinating. It made me want really bad to like read a prequel. Like if there was a prequel of the opera ghost's life before he even made it to the Paris Opera, I would read the heck out of that. I'll put that in the comments. There must be, I'm sure, some literature for that. So if you guys have any recommendations, put them in the comments. I'd love to like sift through that and figure out a couple of books to maybe put on my to-be-read list based off of the life and times of the Phantom of the Opera. One of the other things that made me laugh a lot in this book is that some of the opera guys, I mean, this isn't the fault of Leroux, it's more like modern terminology. Some of the opera guys would refer to as the opera ghost as OG. And like, I don't know if the kids are calling anybody OG anymore, but like every time I would read that, I would start imagining like Ice-T, the original Gangster song that he did. And I was just imagining him playing the Phantom. So now like I really want to see like a movie where Ice-T is playing the Phantom of whatever. So like, let's get on that, guys. Let's get like a a petition going. Shut up and take my money. Give me that Ice-T Phantom movie. I'm ready for it. Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it. Yeah, okay. Oh man. I mean, there is a reason why this story has endured for as long as it has. It was written in 1910, and then it was translated into English a year later. 1925 is when the Lon Chaney movie came out. So, I mean, not much longer. It started really picking up its place in popular culture, and the Phantom himself became part of this pantheon of Gothic horror monsters, up there with Dracula and the Wolfman and the Creature of the Black Lagoon. Then there's, the Phantom of the Opera. It's been depicted everywhere, like Scooby Doo has, several episodes where there's phantoms of whatever, theaters and operas and roller discos and stuff like that. Iron Maiden did a song that, gosh, I'm really getting into it. I'm trying to find my voice, people. I'm finding it. Anywho, then of course, Andrew Lloyd Webber's famous musical happened. Didn't Freddy Krueger do one? Like Robert Englund did a movie. Anyway, there've been so many spin-offs and designs based off of this book. It's a great standalone. It's wonderful. It's funny because like the more I read it, especially closer to the back end where I started kind of reading the origins of the Phantom of the Opera, the more I realized that the Phantom of the Opera is basically the Batman of Gothic horror monsters, right? He's like this guy who has like no powers at all. He's not a supernatural creature. He's not a man with powers of any kind. All he is a dude who is incredibly skilled and incredibly dangerous, right? And he uses his powers of influence and illusion to control people with fear, right? Very much like how Batman operates. This guy is basically Batman. And it made this book all the more, like, it elevated the book for me, even more so. Just when I was like, it's Batman. Oh my gosh, the Phantom of the Opera is Batman of Gothic monsters. It's so awesome. Oh man. But it's true, right? I would give this probably a 7.5 out of 10. And that's mostly because of the fact that they spend a lot of time on Christine and Raoul. I realize they're the main characters, but those characters were a little too flat for me. And I don't really know how Leroux could have fixed it other than trying to give them a little bit more complexity to make them a little bit more interesting. But other than that, if you are a fan of Gothic horror, this is a must-read as far as I'm concerned, because this is it's essential. It's one of those stories that you feel that sympathy for the monster, kind of like how some folks do with Dracula, with that whole star-crossed love kind of thing. But you feel it a lot here as well. You understand him because he is human, right? And he's this human who has been ostracized and put on the outside because he's hideous, he's disfigured. And who hasn't felt a bit outside, and who hasn't felt ostracized at some point in time? I mean, when you actually read like the dialogue in the story, like the actual opera ghost's dialogue, you feel for him, right? Part of that 7.5 is the fact that the opera ghost is very seldom interacted with in the book. He's talked about a lot, but there's, of the 300 or so pages in this book, maybe about 50 pages are actually the Phantom of the Opera interacting with characters and doing his dialogue, and you find him interesting. He's unpredictable in the way he reacts to people. It shows just kind of how complex his particular character is, and it makes him all the more fascinating and enduring, I think, in his place in popular culture. So yeah, 7.5. If you like Gothic horror tales, this is a great read. I totally suggest it. Phantom of the Opera. He is the Batman of Gothic horror monsters. This is my review. I hope you've enjoyed, and I plan on doing much more Gothic horror books. I'm going to be kind of focusing on them. I plan on doing a video to kind of explain why Gothic horror is going to be on my radar pretty hard for the next few months. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching, y'all.